Cass, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me.
I'm so happy to be here.
An Australian in LA. Talk to me about this.
There's a few of us around. We're a special breed. I mean, you know, you've spent a good amount of time in the US, and there's a kinship for sure.
Yeah.
And,
if I could work it out somehow, I'd definitely be half there as well. Oh, okay. I'm really excited to bring you on, and I just wanted to quickly press the record button before we let out too much gold offline, because it was heading that way around your expertise in sleep and all things sleep. And right now, as I mentioned, I'm bringing to life conversations that are helping people tap into their inner experience, their inner world, the best way that they can, with all of the different possibilities and all of the different things that allow us to function as the human being that we are and that we're constantly becoming. And sleep is something that I struggle with from time to time, and sleep is something that I see as something so important for you to be able to function as who you are. And that's where you come in to tell us all about this.
I couldn't agree with you more. And like we were just speaking about offline, the thing that's really struck me so much about sleep is, I mean, everyone struggles with sleep. When someone finds out that sleep is one of my specialties, they're like, oh, I need help sleeping. Or if they don't say, I need help sleeping, they're like, my wife or my husband or my kid or my friend, or, you know, it's so prevalent right now. And then never mind what's been going on in these times of like the COVID pandemic, like trouble sleeping is significantly increased for so many people. But even before this, you know, it's sleeplessness and insomnia and challenges falling asleep and not feeling rested is just so common. So it's a topic that I'm so passionate about, because so many people are suffering, but also because like the quality of the day that we can have and how we can show up and what we can do, I feel is so directly linked to the quality of the sleep that we get at night. That it's like I care about sleep, but I really care about life, and the two go hand in hand. You know, so.
Yes. And that's a beautiful quote. I think that, you know, you were just mentioning offline as well, like people who care about sleep care about life. And it's kind of mind-blowing to think that they go hand in hand in that way, you know. And I think that's it. If it reminds me of people who care about taking care of themselves as well, right? I call it self-respect. People call it self-care, self-love, whatever you want to call it. It's like, it's that whole element. Like, if you care about you, it's not a selfish thing. It's necessary if you want to have the life that you can live.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And the thing that I see with sleep too is that people habituate to a level of sleep deprivation and kind of just get used to operating throughout the day at their normal state, but they don't realize that they're functioning suboptimally because of the sleep at night. It's just what their life is like, and they don't realize that if you put some attention and some focus on the sleep at night, that the day and your experience of yourself and your experience of how you can move through the day can change dramatically and be so much better than you even realize when you focus on sleep. I think it kind of breaks my heart to think about how many people are suffering, but not even realizing that they're suffering because of sleep deprivation throughout the day, because it's just become their new normal. You know?
Oh, yeah, I 1000% agree. I think I remember the first time I experienced fasting. The thing that I discovered at the other side of that was, you don't know how good you can feel until you can feel it. And so I thought I was like pretty healthy, you know, like I was like fit and and then I had this experience and was like, holy shit, like I didn't realize how shit I was feeling before to what I can now feel. And so it sounds like that's the same thing as when you can optimize your sleep and realize that it's such a beautiful metaphor of like so many people are just living life at an average rate. Like they're just living their average life when they could be optimizing that and living so much more potential and fully, but they're just settling for average, and it's freaking starts with our sleep.
It's absolutely.
Wow. Okay, this is good. So where do you start when somebody is feeling challenged with sleep, or is the better question to ask, how do we know if we're not fully optimized in sleep?
Those are both really good questions. One of the quick assessments for whether we're getting enough sleep actually comes from my sleep researcher hero, Dr. Matthew Walker. We can talk about him later or now, but he's been researching sleep for a very long time, and he recently released his book, Why We Sleep, which I recommend highly if anyone's really interested in this topic. Except if you struggle with insomnia, do not read this book. Address the insomnia first and then read the book, because the book lists in great detail all the dangers of sleep deprivation. And we don't want to give someone who, when they close their eyes at night, who's already worried about trying to fall asleep, even more ammunition to be worried about trying to fall asleep. So sidebar, only read it if you can fall asleep reasonably well. So it comes from him, and the little like self-assessment is, can you function throughout the day without caffeine by like 10 or 11 a.m. and could you fall back asleep at like 10 or 11 a.m. and if you can't function well without caffeine, there's a very good suggestion then that your sleep is not optimal at night. And if you could fall back asleep easily at 10 or 11, again, that kind of is a sign that there's a lot of room for improvement in sleep. And people will often say to me, oh, I sleep great. I can, I just close my eyes anywhere and I'll fall asleep. I'm such a good sleeper. And that always sends off alarm bells for me, because we shouldn't be able to fall asleep within 2 minutes sitting in the chair at a doctor's office. There's something else going on with the sleep at night. If your body is so sleep deprived and tired that it takes 2 minutes of stillness and your eyes closed to be able to fall asleep. So kind of to come back to your question, really checking out and being honest with yourself about, okay, how am I doing throughout the day? Could I get by without caffeine if I needed to? Am I able to stay reasonably alert till at least that kind of like 3 o'clock slump in the afternoon? Kind of good questions to start with.
That's really interesting. Is there a like difference between meditation and what's the actual question that I'm wanting to get at is that often people who are practicing meditation can fall asleep in the day opposed to meditating. So is that a kind of sign that there's something not quite right with your sleep when you're meditating, you're just wanting to fall into sleep?
That's a fantastic question. Again, it's like everything in this field. Sleep is so nuanced and so individual and different for everyone. But I'll kind of answer that with some broad strokes. Is that when we're doing a meditation practice, particularly if it's a body sensing or a body focused meditation practice, it's going to generally bring the body down into a relaxed state. And if the body is tired and sleep deprived, chances are the body's just going to take you straight to sleep, because sleep is so necessary for functioning. And our body is so intelligent. It's like, oh, I see an opportunity to try and get some sleep. that while you're relaxed and you're quiet and you're not distracted by the outside world, just take you to sleep. Now, that can be a sign that someone is somewhat sleep deprived, and fighting against that, I don't recommend, because, meditation is my life's work. It's so important, but so is sleep. And it's kind of like a hierarchy of needs. If you really need sleep, battling against sleep to focus on your attention, to me, is kind of like a waste of your energy. Like, get the rest that you need. And then once you don't need to fall asleep anymore, you're not going to.
Yeah.
However, there is the caveat is, if someone's, we can also fall asleep as resistance, and it's very difficult to differentiate whether that's purely resistance or whether someone's resisting their experience and they actually have some type of challenge with their sleep, which is why their body keeps trying to go to sleep. So
I think that's a really interesting concept at the moment, because and as you are as well, we're both very much into our feminine work and have been studying and exploring that within ourselves. And what I see happening in the world right now, and what I've noticed for a while in the feminine, specifically in women, and more specifically in like our mum generation, is that there is this constant need for rest and this epic exhaustion that's taking place. And like, that's no joke, because I've seen my mum, like my personal mum, since the day I was born, like not stop, right? Like, she's just like this weapon of a woman that's just like pushed on and continued on. And so I see this in a lot of mums, right? This like ability to keep pushing on because they need to, and they provide for people because they've just been so conditioned that they have to keep going. And there's this exhaustion that's really taking place, and I believe it's stopping, or not stopping, but it's creating a hurdle in the feminine healing that needs to happen. And yet there's such a resistance and a barrier for them to even be able to lay down. I literally had this conversation with my mum of like, hey, like, well, what do you need? And she's like, just feel like I need a day of rest. I'm like, cool, then do the thing. But she just can't do the thing. Like, she's like, nope, got to get up at 6 and got to do the thing. Like, so there's this like almost like this massive resistance in order just to listen to that and honor that and feel like it's okay to do that.
I observed the same thing in my wonderful mother, and in so many women, in men too. But I love this conversation about seeing it in women and the feminine in women, that there's so many different elements to that too, right? There's where we've equated culturally productivity with self-worth. There's where we have, like, you listen to people almost compete for, I got the least sleep last night and I'm still doing XYZ. I'm surviving on 2 hours, or I'm surviving on this, or I'm surviving, barely making it through. But I think there's also what you pointed out so beautifully, is that women, particularly mothers, are so incredibly resilient and can do so much. And because of biology and the nervous system, it can override so many of their own internal signals to tend and take care of others, that once they no longer need to do that or be in that role, it's really difficult to shift backwards, or not backwards, but shift over into being the center of their own reality and being tending to their own needs again as primary. So there's that. And then there's this, I've noticed it a lot, where, when you're running and you kind of like, the first little while can be a little difficult, but then you kind of push through and you just can keep going. You've got endorphins going, you've got adrenaline going, there's good cortisol circulating, and you can just, you know, you break through and you can keep going. And then when you get to the end, suddenly you're like, whew, I'm exhausted, you know. I see it all the time with people. They just get caught in that go mode, and have the knowing, if I stop, I'm just going to collapse and I'm not going to be able to get back up again. So I'm just going to keep going and going and going and going and going and going. And then we have our choice of beverages that will help us continue to keep going and going and going and going and going. That it's so profound for people to learn to stop and give themselves a chance to actually rest and go inward. That it's almost radical for people to give themselves that chance. And then it's also scary, because if once you're busy and going and doing and being, you don't you're distracted, you're engaged, your attention is outside of yourself. But a lot of people, particularly in our parents' generation, don't necessarily have the tools for navigating their internal world and the things that might be present when they slow down enough to feel what's going on. That's further motivation for people to keep going, you know.
Absolutely agree with that one wholeheartedly. Well, okay, so that's interesting. And do you find any of the people that you've worked with or helped in that arena that, like, their prescription, say, is literally just like, hey, you just simply need to permission slip yourself right here, right now, and lay down, and if you need to sleep, like, is it common that people's, like, prescription just needs to be, you need to have a day of rest, or you need to have a weekend where you chill, or is it more, because I understand that there's no quick fix, and I also understand that potentially if someone's been burnt out for years, then it's a process. It's not like a quick weekend retreat and you're good. Like, there's a process, right? And so but is someone's prescription like to just have a weekend to sleep and you're going to feel way better, or like how would you help someone in that space?
Great question. It really depends so much on what's going on for that individual, because another piece that I didn't mention is that there's so much unresolved trauma that people come up against. So
when they're sleeping, or
let me unpack that a little bit. So a lot of the people that come to me will say, you know, I've had trouble sleeping for 10 years, 15 years, 5 years. And once we start to dig into it a little bit, there'll have been some event or some association that they've created with either rest and relaxation not being safe because of some incident that happened, or some incident that actually happened around sleep. So their body then created this association that it's actually not safe to go to sleep. And so they're avoiding resting and avoiding going to sleep because there's some underlying fear. And I can give you some great examples. I had have this amazing client who's given me full permission to share her story because she's so passionate about it now. She's in her late 60s. She's a lawyer, very intelligent, very driven woman. And she had such serious TMD pain because of clenching that she actually ground down both jaw joints and had to have a complete jaw replacement surgery, MMA surgery, which is a very invasive, very extensive surgery. And so she has new jaw joints. And about a year post-surgery, she was still in significant pain in her jaw. So, and she had seen she saw that she got the operation done by the best surgeon in the country. She had seen all of these incredible therapists but she still intuited there was some reason. They had fixed the mechanical problem, but they didn't address why she was clenching her jaw in the first place. And through a wonderful series of events, she got referred to me. At the end of our first session, she says, "Not sure if this is relevant," which is always a sign. You're like, okay, let's pay attention here. Not sure if this is relevant, but when I was 15, I was in a serious car accident. And she went on to describe this incredibly traumatic experience that she went through, where both her parents were killed, and it was, and then she went to live with her grandmother, and no one ever talked to her about the trauma. And, this is many decades on. She has no emotional response to it, can talk about it like she's talking about dinner. She's like, I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but that happened to me. And so all these like lines were forming in my head. I'm like, well, of course, this woman, or she was a girl at that time, went through such an extreme experience. Her body would have gone into a freeze response because you can't run and you can't fight an accident like that. And she never got the resolution where her body learned that it was actually safe to relax. So she was in a some sort of clenched state for her entire life. And part of that, she actually had to wear gloves while driving because her hands would clench so tightly she would bruise herself, and clenching her jaw. So a big part of working with her was teaching her body that it actually was safe to relax. Wasn't safe back then, but now life's very different, and it is actually safe for her body to relax. And that once she got that imprint in her nervous system, the pain went away. And she still gets tightness when she gets stressed, but she understands now what she needs to do in order to calm all the tension patterns back.
Wow.
So
wow.
There's everyone has a different story, right? And everyone's got a different experience through life, but a common theme, I mean, that's quite an extreme example, but so many people have had things happen where their body has gone into that fight, flight, or freeze response, and then slowing down and resting is really scary for them, and they don't even know why. Or sleep is really scary for them, and they don't even know why. There's some kind of subconscious association that first needs to be addressed, and then someone can really give themselves the permission to rest. And I mean, there are people who that's not the case for them, and they need the invitation and the importance and the motivation to say, okay, you need to give yourself 5 minutes or 10 minutes in the afternoon to rest and do this guided meditation, or a chance to just be on the weekends. Like, that's also part of it. But I'm so interested in why someone's avoiding slowing down, or why someone's resisting going to sleep, like what that is. Because if we address that, then the cascade effects are many.
Yes, I absolutely agree. I love that. What do you, for this lady, I'm curious, did she work through meditation, or what tools did she use to feel safe in her body?
So I've trained as a psychologist. I've been trained in trauma and how to work with trauma through different somatic techniques. And then I've also had a lot of training in meditation and yoga nidra, specifically I rest yoga nidra. So I have a lot of tools in my toolkit that I can bring to working with someone. And for her, she had never meditation. She comes from a small town in Illinois. Meditation is like a dirty word in her town, So first she had to kind of come to grips with the fact that this is what she was doing, and bless her heart, she was open enough to trust me and go through the process. But for her, it was about using meditation techniques and different body sensing, body tracking, somatic techniques to first teach her how to allow her body to go into a relaxed state, and then different kind of associative techniques to send her body the message that it's actually safe to be at ease, it's safe to let go. And we did like some deep imagery work on resolving a lot of that. So it was kind of like a full range of things, but now she does a lot of like body sensing, breath sensing, kind of techniques to activate the relaxation response. Now that she's got the association resolved, she just needs to really keep working with noticing when her body goes up and then helping herself kind of downshift.
Oh, that is so good. And I love that story for an example as well. Another question that I think stemmed from what I mentioned around the feminine, the women sleep is the question around, do you find it's different for men and women biologically, like of what they perhaps need, or how much like do women often exhaust themselves more and then get to a point of there's a more serious issue because they've pushed and pushed and pushed, opposed to men? Or is it different or the same? Or like, what is there any differences that we can look at?
Really good question. It's funny, 90% of my practice is men. And that's not because of my marketing or who I'm speaking to. I mean, I think my website is like pink. And this is total just speculatory. Men, when they realize there's a problem with sleep, they get into action about it. When the pain becomes too great, or they get referred by a doctor, or they realize, wow, this is having a huge effect, then they finally get tipped over the edge, and then they're willing to take a chance and work with me. Whereas women seem to just keep going and not take the time to really address the issues that they need to. And I think there's something if it's in the masculine and the feminine, or if it's in the gender kind of psyche, but it's really interesting that the majority, I have women clients, but they come for other reasons. They don't come for sleep. The men who are making the commitment to do what they need to do around sleep, which is very interesting.
I find that so interesting, like I find that so interesting. And I wonder if it's mums, like where they have kids, majority of these women, because I don't have a kid, but I also find that you have to jeopardize a lot of your, or what's not jeopardize, what's the word? Like give up a lot of your sleep when you have a kid. And so is it mums, or is it just women in general? Like, is it just so deeply in our DNA that that's just what we do?
Yeah. And when women are so adaptable, women just blow me away on a regular basis, particularly mums of young kids, what they can do throughout the day with fumes for sleep at night.
And then the other thing is, like, I've done a lot of work and interviewed an incredible company called PH360, and have understood so much about my own self through them, through biology, through epigenetics, through all of this stuff. And I learned through that I was like pushing myself into this box of get up and be an early bird, like get the stuff done, and then like try and go to sleep early, but then I couldn't go to sleep early, and I'd go to sleep late, and then I'd get up early, and then I was in this weird thing because there was like this story that played out that said, if you sleep in, you're like, that's bad. And so I would like pretend to, like force myself to get up and force myself to this early bird. And then ever since working with these guys, they're like, no, your whole system is set up to be somebody who's actually a late owl, who's more productive in the evening. Your mind's going to be going more in the evening, and that you're better to sleep not get up so early, but like have enough rest in the morning, and then start your day slow and start with meditation and not move into high intensity. So they like dissected this whole thing. And for like 6 months, I was like, no. Like, like, I just didn't want to buy it. I was like, no, I can't. Like, I can't get up late because then that means I'm like these stories like that I've created that it's a bad thing. And then ever since like living into it, it's bang on. Like it makes me feel so much better when I'm in that state instead of forcing myself into a box of like what I thought that I needed to be. Do you, what do you get from that?
Oh, I love hearing that. And I can so relate to that. There's so many of these incredibly successful, productive people out there, you know, learn so-and-so's morning routine and follow, you know, what so-and-so does, and you'll be successful and productive.
5 a.m. club.
Oh God, I can't think of anything worse. But I think you're so right on that so many people just buy that as that, you know, people get so dogmatic about things and think that there's one right way to do something, or there's one right way to be productive. And I mean, there's a lot of conversation now about chronotypes. And I think that's what you're referring to,
yes.
where someone's more of a night owl or an early bird, or I think there's a whole different kind of model for that for people. And I haven't looked into it in great depth. My basic philosophy is do what works for you.
Yeah.
So if you're better off working later into the night and sleeping in, and that works for you, meaning when you wake up, you feel rested, you're able to function well throughout the day, you feel good about falling asleep at night at the time that you fall asleep, like do that. Don't force yourself into a rhythm that isn't native and productive for you. And if it works for you to get up at 4 a.m., God bless. But give yourself the chance at least to get the 7 to 9 hours that the majority of us actually need. But I think it's such a good point to remind people that just because one routine or one like time of sleep works for someone doesn't mean it's going to work for you, and it doesn't mean it's going to work for you for the rest of your life too. You know, to really tune into yourself and see what works for you, and also experiment. You know, like try it out for a few weeks. If you've been battling yourself to get up at 5:30 in the morning, just try for a few weeks. See what happens if you let yourself go to bed a little later and sleep a little later, if you're fortunate enough to allow your schedule to allow for that. I really encourage people to try and find what works for you right now. You know?
Is there a waking up to like an alarm or waking up to like chaos? Is there I hate alarms. There was one point in time not long ago where I couldn't work out how to turn my alarm volume down, and so it was literally somehow on full pelt. It would go off in the morning, and at that time I had to get up at like 5:30, 6 a.m. and I was like jumping foot in the air because I was like, wow, like it was so scary for me. Oh, horrible. Like the way not to get into my heart is to like wake me up like that. I need to be gently rocked into life. Is there, what's the way in which we should wake up? Is there an optimal way to bring us into life?
Well, there's it's a wonderful question. And I don't think that's the way for anyone to get jolted into the day by an intensely loud alarm, because what that does is that like kicks your nervous system into a stress response straight away. You almost don't have a choice. You're like, sleep is one of the most vulnerable states that we could possibly be in. If you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, we are completely we can't defend ourselves while we're asleep. So the ideal is to have a smooth transition out of sleep and into wakefulness, and then again at night a smooth transition from wakefulness down into sleep, so that you're not getting activated into that fight, flight, or freeze response straight away, and that you can kind of linger in that in-between state, which is so like luscious, you know, that kind of half awake, half asleep. You're still kind of dreamy, it's just like so soothing. And like one of my old colleagues used to say, it's like getting dipped in the honey pot, where you're just like coated in goodness, like starting your day coming in that way, and then also going out that way is just you're setting yourself up for an ideal day. And now obviously we can't always do that. Sometimes there's kids that wake us up, or there's other things that we don't allow for the ideal wake up. But there's wonderful alarm clocks now that will actually just start emitting light to kind of mimic the sunrise, and then will very slowly, after a period of time, start to bring sound in until you turn them off. And I think that's a much more gentle way of like calling yourself out of sleep in a way that's not going to automatically put you into that stress.
Yeah, there's that beautiful sleep cycle one that I use, that I should use more of, but wakes you up between, like you put in, I need to be up by 8, and so it will wake you up between 7:30 and 8 of when you're most alert, and with like really gentle sounds. It's really soothing and beautiful. And yeah, it's such a better way, and then you get to track your sleep, right? Okay, I love the analogy of the honeypot. And so talk about the honeypot leading into sleep the night before, because if I again lead from experience of being a horrible poster child for sleep, I will get all of my ideas at like midnight, to the point where sometimes I'm like, all right, we're getting up and we're mind mapping, because I have no other choice. It's just like my mind's really active. Some other times the stress will kick in. So if I've had a busy day and I haven't got to some decisions I've needed to make, or some things that I've been putting on the back burner or whatever, I'll literally be up for hours. Like it'll just be circulating in my mind. Or sometimes I'll think about like the most random things ever. Like my mind's just so active. And so is there a way in which I can really allow myself to seep into the honeypot to then go to sleep in a more like natural, beautiful way? Or is that just my natural thing that I need to work with?
Great question. So there's a few pieces here. One is giving yourself wind down time. Like we wouldn't expect, to go from I don't know, like I've got running on the brain for whatever reason. You wouldn't expect yourself to go for a run and then come back and then automatically do give a big presentation. You need to like cool down from the run, take a cool shower, do whatever you need to do. We would never expect ourselves to go from one extreme state to another. Yet we do that most evenings. We expect ourselves to be working late, or being on the laptop, or doing very higher order cognitive processes and thinking and planning and strategizing, and then suddenly drift off to sleep. It's really unrealistic to expect that of ourselves. So creating the time, even if it's just 10-15 minutes, counts, where you give yourself a chance to close the computer, you turn the lights down low, you turn off any music that's stimulating, you don't move quickly, you kind of just give yourself that chance to downshift in your gears internally before you then get into bed. And that's where a routine and a ritual can help load that into your system, so that when the lights go down, and I shower by candlelight often, and
I love that.
It's so simple, it's so lovely. It helps not having your retina bombarded with light. The flickering of the candle is so lovely, and I get to wash away the day. It cools my body down, or warms it up in winter, and then the body temperature drops a little, which also helps initiate sleep. There's but it's more than that as well. It's creates a expectation in my body and my nervous system that tells it, okay, it's time to start winding down, so that by the time I get into bed, it's so I'm so ready. I'm so ready, and I'm so happy to be here.
How long do you give yourself to wind down?
Ideally 30 minutes for me works really well.
Mm-hmm.
But the way I work, I can't work on a laptop or do cognitive tasks really once the sun goes down. I'm just useless. I'm really good in the morning, not super early, but I'm really good in the morning, and I'm good in the early afternoon. And then I have a little bit of a spurt around 5 or 6, but past 7, there's no point in me like doing any work or making big decisions. So my whole evening is a nice slow downhill towards sleep.
Yeah. And again, that goes with our, the epigenetics and the types that I was talking about before, is that they talk about like that your health type would be that, whereas mine is like not that. Like mine is like gets revved up. But what I can see is what I'm not doing is I'm not actually, for some reason, when I asked you how long your routine is, I thought you were going to say, oh, it's like 4 hours. And I was like, oh God, like imagine me finishing at like 10 p.m. and then needing 4 hours but like half an hour, I'm like, oh, I can do that. Like I could definitely put that into my life. And I think that would make such a difference, because at times I forget that this is important. And I go from the laptop to bed thinking like, why can't I sleep? Yes.
Right.
And so it's just 30 minutes would be so transformational in that.
Completely. And then the other thing I wanted to share, and I'm glad you brought it up because it's a really common thing for people, is bedtime thoughts. That when you get into bed, the lights go out, you're not distracted by the outside world. Often a lot of thoughts will come up, particularly if the body's still in a stressed state. The thoughts will be quite predominant, and there might be a lot of them present. And what I love to work with people on is starting to differentiate between thoughts that are really helpful, that you actually like some of them that you're describing, where you just have all of these amazing ideas and you just can like map out something that's really important. Like that's something to value. So for people, I'll say keep like a notepad by your bed, so that when you're falling asleep and these things kind of come to you, write them down so that you don't have to try and remember them to do it the next day, or get out a screen, look at a bright light that then disrupts your ability to fall asleep as well, because of what it does to melatonin, and that's a whole other conversation. So to differentiate between those kind of thoughts that are inspired and valuable and you want to actually jot them down, to the thoughts that are just distracting and unhelpful and just a product of an overstressed body and nervous system, where they're just those random thoughts just keep going and going and going. And if it's those thoughts, then implementing techniques that ideally we've worked on throughout the day, so that we have them available to us, where we can let the thoughts go in the corner and then focus in on the body, the breath, and do a practice to help, like, again, calm everything down so that you can then fall asleep. But it's really, I think, important to note that not all thoughts are created equal, and some need to be like written down, acknowledged, and put on paper, and to give yourself permission to do that. And that occasionally, maybe those are going to be your best brainstorming nights, that sometimes you do need to turn on the light and go for it and map it all out. Those are gold, those thoughts, and to not just automatically kind of push them to the side because it's bedtime.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Oh, what are you mostly passionate about when it comes to sleep? And maybe that's like right now, because it might be constantly moving and changing as you go deeper into it. But what is something that you're just like lit up about when it comes to sleep? Nerding out on that.
Oh my gosh, such a good question in so many areas. But I'm nerding out on kind of two things. One's like a newer thing, and then my general overall thing with sleep. The temperature is something that I'm getting very nerdy about right now. Maybe because it's getting warmer in Los Angeles, and it's much harder to fall asleep when we're warm. I mean, a lot of people have experienced that, but the science is telling us that the body actually needs to drop, the core body temperature needs to drop a few degrees in order to let the body kind of like initiate sleep. So if you're in a hot room, it's really difficult to fall asleep. And so I actually have it in a box over there. I just ordered a chili pad, which it goes underneath your sheet on top of your mattress, and it puts water, I believe, through the pad to keep your core body temperature at a specific level to help initiate sleep, and then also to help with staying asleep and deep sleep. So I'm getting like super excited and nerded out on that. And then there's also when we're in a stressed state, our core body temperature rises. So stress automatically is going to get in the way of us falling asleep because of so many different things, but cortisol and the body not feeling safe. But then also when we're in a stressed state, we're warmer. So anything that like can help bring your temperature down can have a dramatic effect for people in falling asleep, which is so fascinating.
That is so fascinating, isn't it? And I definitely notice that when I kick into a shame spiral or a stress moment when I'm in bed, I start to overheat.
Heat up. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh, amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
And what's your other one? Your overall one?
Oh, so I'm trained as a psychologist, and I got a very a wonderful degree in training in higher education from a great school. But we learned nothing about sleep, nothing. We learned how to diagnose insomnia, but that was it. Like the diagnostic criteria for insomnia. No training around sleep. And I have done a lot of talks here in Los Angeles and actually across the States too. Hardly anyone in the medical field, but in the whole field of psychology and mental health is getting any training around sleep, which is astonishing to me, given that the research is like so clear. There's a bi-directional relationship between poor mental health and poor sleep that we've all had the experience of. If you're not sleeping well, you don't feel good. And the thoughts that you think are coming from a sleep-deprived brain, which is like your whole prefrontal cortex isn't functioning optimally. We're basically regressing into children cognitively to us. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but to illustrate the point, so much of our brain is compromised and we don't even realize when we're sleep deprived. So the way that we think about things, the way we see, outlook on life, the way we see ourselves is all so impacted by our sleep. And then when you're having experiences with anxiety or depression or attention deficit disorder or like any diagnosable mental health issue, disturbed sleep is part of the criteria. It's like they go hand in hand, and there's no training. And people are getting way overprescribed sleeping meds, which don't actually address the problem why someone's sleeping. They just mask the symptoms and then create a whole other cascade of issues with dependency, and then it's a really easy downward spiral with sleep meds. It's like these two fields are so complementary, but there's no real overlap. So I'm so fired up about bringing education to people in the mental health field, and then also bringing education to people in the medical field to say hey, there's so many different things that they talk about in the medical field, such as, sleep apnea with the airway that closes up at night, or issues with the tongue or issues with the mouth that impact sleep. But there's also all of these psychological nervous system issues and stress and anxiety being the two primary causes of insomnia, it's like we need to be working together here. Like it's a no-brainer to me. And like we talked about at the beginning, you know, if we just get used to like a subpar sleep experience and a subpar day experience, that people don't make it a priority to address the sleeping issues. So that whole bringing together those two fields is something that I'm really like, this is what I'm here on the planet to do. And I'm so fortunate. I get to work with a sleep clinic here in Westwood, actually, in LA, called the Breathe Institute. And they are phenomenal in terms of being so holistically orientated to the whole person and considering the psychological and nervous system piece. And they refer clients to me, and they bring me on courses and invite me to speak. And they're a big kind of proponent of all of these different elements of what is needed to address sleep issues. So I'm so grateful for them. But yeah, I'm like, let's get these two fields talking and working together so people can sleep well, so people can actually live the life that they want to live during the day.
This is so good. This is so good. Because yes, like I think, like I love that you're fired up about this, and I love that you're doing it because you're like, it's so needed and necessary, and you have also such a beautiful holistic viewpoint and understanding and knowledge on it. And at the same time, it like I can see the interest that I have in what I do. It links directly into it too, right? Because of this whole, if we go off this like living a below average life linked to a below average sleep, and then I'm all about like unlocking people's, you know, truth and heart and potential, and like to live a life that they fully want to live in this world, like, and they all just like happen to go hand in hand everywhere. And so there's so many tweaks, and this is what I always talk about, like it's like not this one thing, like it's not this, like not just like a one thing that we can move and you can download this PDF and then you're all sweet. Like it's like, no, like it's like there's so many different elements that come into it, and we just have to have a willingness to go into the parts of us that we're avoiding, or that aren't quite right, or we're not asking questions about, or we're not being curious about, like, and it's a whole journey, so many layers to this existence of life. You know,
Well
so
said.
I'm so glad that you're doing this.
Oh, thank you. And just to like flip it back on you too, like the work during the day is so important for the sleep at night, because another thing we haven't spoken about is if there's something that you're not looking at in your life, whether it's a relationship or something that happened in the past, or a behavior, or a, you know, you name it, there's something that there's resistance to looking at during the day. Where is that going to show up? It's going to show up when you're falling asleep at night, when there's no distractions, you're left alone with yourself. There's this like opportunity, and also in dreams too. And I love that you were sharing that offline. Like, we can't hide from ourselves when we're sleeping. We can't hide from ourselves when we're alone in the dark. And sometimes the issue with sleep isn't actually an issue with sleep. It's an issue with not addressing something during the day that is then kind of like knocking on the door of your awareness at night, when there's, you know, the ambient noise is quiet enough that addressing things during the day can then also have a big effect on your ability to fall asleep and then stay asleep at night. So it's all needs to be looked at as like a whole, rather than like just one small different element.
Yes. And that's funny that you say that too. There's like a part of me that was like, oh, I remember the times when I've like been crying at night and like releasing and having this whole big release, and then I feel super tender, and then those are the nights where I just go into the deepest sleep and I just feel so regenerated, because I've just let go of whatever the thing was that was like building up inside of me, right? And so that's a beautiful example of like the times that you do sleep really well is when you have had, you know, those big moments of looking in the mirror, or like looking at the stuff that you've been avoiding. So that's so key. I love that. where can people go to find out more about what you do and what you share? Because you also do so much around meditation as well, right?
Thank you. Yeah, I've found that meditation gives us the tools to actually address and do a lot of what we've been talking about. And it's just like inner navigation tools, I love that you're calling the podcast and the work the inner experience, because it's what we're all either avoiding or going into. And for me, and there's so many different pathways in, but for me, meditation and the tools that I've learned have been so valuable, and for the people that I work with. So yeah, I'm such a big fan of meditation. So people can find me at my website, which is www.cassandracarlopio.com.
I'll link that up as well so people have that.
Great. Thank you. And that basically has everything on it. Yeah, and I just recently actually launched a meditation app into the world, which is such a big thing to do. But there's information about that on my website too, and it has meditations tailored for sleep and for stress and for anxiety, and then also for I call it exploring the inner world. So that's,
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that, Cass. Yeah, so I'm going to link that up, and I hope everyone goes and visits and has a look. Is there one last message that you would love to share, you feel guided to share around sleep, or something that's alive on your heart?
Yeah, just that if you're struggling to sleep, you're not alone. And I get so frustrated when I read these articles that are written or that go around social media that are like, oh, just do these 4 things, or smell these essential oils, or drink this tea, and then you're going to suddenly sleep better. And I'm like, it's so insulting to someone who's really struggling sincerely to fall asleep. It's like amazing if that works for you, but that doesn't mean lavender oil is going to work for everyone. A lot of the time it's like a deeply rooted issue in the nervous system, or it's habitual, or it's someone's dealing with real stress or real anxiety or some real issue in their life, or some big decision that they need to make. And to minimize it by saying, oh, you just need to do follow these 3 or 4 steps, just doesn't sit right with me. So if you're struggling with sleep, don't be hard on yourself that you haven't been able to figure it out on your own. You're not functioning at your best, and you don't know what you don't know. And to really reach out to someone who is a professional in this field that can kind of help you navigate this, and that things can be so much better. Like, sleep is a big thing to tackle, but it's so worth it. Like the payoff of sleeping well at night is huge. And I really want to encourage anyone struggling with sleep to if they feel called, to really go down this road of investigating sleep and getting the help that they need, because it makes such a difference during the day.
You don't know how good you can feel until you can feel it.
Exactly. You so got it. You got it.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I think you're just this ray of light, and you inspire me so much to just want to look at ways in which I'm kind of avoiding the cracks in the system to have an optimal sleep, because I'm inspired by the honeypot analogy, mostly because it feels so good to imagine just being dipped in honey. But but looking at the honeypot going in and out, moving into sleep and then waking up. And I've had moments of those that I freaking love. And so I'm going to, from this conversation, you've inspired me to add more of that into my day, into my daily routine, and creating a routine ritual around it. So thank you for the inspiration, and thank you for your wisdom, your knowledge, and everything that you bring to the planet, because we need you.
Thank you so much for